before. So
It's not that hard, I have.
okay, good. So maybe I'll just let you do most of the work here because it's all about you and it's your film. A lot of us watched the film. I watched the film yesterday, shot in Bombay. Heard very good things about your other films. We were talking about this earlier. I haven't seen your other films, but I liked your film a lot.
Thank you.
I did.
Always good to hear.
No, it was great. And you had, we were talking about this earlier. I think as a documentary filmmaker, the biggest challenge is getting access, getting people to open up, and
Yeah.
how did you go around that?
I mean, I think, well, to begin with, you learn a lot about, well, we had BBC behind this, right? And it was a big commission and a production company in London, and they had their connections in Bombay, and I think they thought we'd be able to sort of waltz in and say, hey, we're going to profile you for BBC, won't that be great? And everyone would be all excited, and of course that wasn't the case at all, because they don't need BBC viewers to be tuned into Bollywood. They have already got all the publicity they need, within the industry. So, and furthermore, there have been a bunch of pretty bad television docs about Bollywood, which I've seen bits and pieces of. BBC, Channel 4, kind of entertainment news stuff. I mean, there was no consent. We'd say, well, this is going to be a film festival doc, and it's a feature, and it's creative, and it's this and it's that. And that, to a lot of people in the feature business, a doc is a doc. And it's a doc, it's a television thing, it's going to make us look like idiots because that's what people do with Bollywood. They sort of focus on the song and dance
Right.
the preening and the kitsch stuff. And so I think there was an assumption that a lot of people had been burned and they didn't want anything to do with it. And we had a schedule, and we had to get going fairly quickly. So we didn't have a lot of choices. And at the first, I did start to panic at one point because it didn't seem like we were going to be able to find all the films that wanted us were films that weren't sure when they were starting and this and that. Anyway, I'm rambling because it took forever to figure out what to do. We heard about Shootout, and at first I thought, well, that's way too atypical and sort of strange, and it's not the kind of film. We wanted something that sort of was representative of Bollywood. But once I kind of got into hearing about the different layers, I mean, the fact that it was a film about these underworld gangsters who are reputed to be, really tangled up with the film business itself, that sort of mirror relationship was really, really enticing. And the idea of, how do you make a gritty, real story, which is what they were presenting it as. Is it going to? What does gritty and real mean to them, and what does it mean to me, and blah blah blah. And then, of course, the Sanjay Dutt story, which to anyone who knows anything about Hindi cinema is old news, but to my commissioning editor at BBC was just the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. So this film brought together a lot of things that weren't what you think of when you think of a documentary about Bollywood, and that was really promising.
I think you
exciting
couldn't have
for
picked
us.
a better film to make this thing about it because, as you're saying, there's just so many layers around this. You captured the whole the Bollywood underworld nexus that everyone talks about. Everyone in India is familiar about. Sanjay, that's the court case and all of that. Making an Indian film, making a Bollywood film. You just capture so many different things in this one film, and I think this was the perfect film for you to make a documentary.
It's funny because this morning I was just looking at some old emails, searching for something, and I found this exchange that I'd had with someone who was helping me out in Bombay when we were trying to decide whether to go with the Shootout or a Mahesh Bhatt production. And he was like, but Mahesh Bhatt is so the essence of this weird, his films are just continually so popular, even though they're often not particularly good. And this formula that he's just got down in a way. He's so representative, and he's such a character, of course, and he may be on the media all over the place in India, but he's still fairly new to American and British audiences. So it was really tempting to go with him, and I just thought he'd be a great person to follow, whereas Apu, Young, Gupta, they don't jump out to you immediately as people who would jump off the screen and be great documentary characters, or let you do that. That was the biggest concern was, are they going to be kind of closed and controlling, whereas Mahesh Bhatt says whatever he wants all the time.
Was there a film that Mahesh Bhatt had on the floors?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. They were shooting in Bangkok or something. The problem was it was clearly going to take like the next 6 months for them to shoot, and Shootout was finishing up. But anyway, in this exchange, it was like, well, on the one hand, we have that sort of, very typical and successful and established setup with a lot of history, and then you have this new thing, which is sort of this experiment, but has all these different layers. And my worry as a filmmaker was like, can I pull off these 3 storylines: the story of the making of the film, the story that the film, telling the story that the film is based on, and the Sanjay Dutt story? It's a hell of a lot of information to cram into one documentary, and it wasn't easy, but I'm really glad we decided to do it.
Was there any way you could have had this as sort of a featurette part of Shootout Lokhandwala, like at least have a part of it?
What do you mean?
On the DVD of Shootout Lokhandwala, would it have been possible
for our film?
Yeah.
Well, no, they did their own making of, and we were quite, I think that, the making of genre is a very particular genre, and the kind of doc I was making was not really of that school. I think partly because it's not just focused on the stars, and partly because there's so much more to it than what any of the people doing Shootout cared about. So I don't know. When my producers thought it'd be a great opportunity for Eros because they're distributing Shootout, to distribute this as well, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not sure why. Fortunately, I'm not privy to those conversations. Fortunately, I hate producing. I hate distribution. I hate the business side of it. I'm happy to talk about the films and why I want to make them and why I think they're exciting and why I think everyone should see them, but I have no desire to be involved in any of the deal making. Makes me crazy.
Are you aware of what's happening to the film now in the distribution end?
What, my film?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. I say that I don't want to be involved, but like every day I'm emailing and saying, have you called these guys? Have you done this? So no, I'm a control freak about it. I just don't want to. I don't know what's happening in terms of distribution in India. I think nothing, because I think no one quite knows what to do, because there isn't really an established route for documentaries there. It's hard enough for docs here.
Yeah, I know.
And so here we have a couple of distributors who are looking at it. I think that what I would like to see happen, but I don't have the time to make it happen myself, is some small distribution company who's really creative about outreach and about saying, all right, well, let's take this on as a doc, but let's not just go to the places that traditionally show docs. Let's do outreach to people who are going to know these backstories, be really excited to see these things with Sanjay and Vivek, and want to hear stories about Bombay. If they go to sort of the Indian community in Bollywood, it's a huge audience, but it's not one that the art house cinemas and the documentary distributors are used to reaching out to. So I think there's a real opportunity here, but I suspect that it probably won't be taken.
I think it's probably harder for this film because it's not judgmental, really. People may have said that it is, but I think it was a very almost objective film about what's going on. And normally when you watch a documentary that comes out of India, or it's about anything that's done in India, there's this very heavy-handedness about it, whereas your style is a lot more subtle. Even your jokes, your humor in the whole thing was, you leave your camera on Sanjay and someone else, and you just wait for. I don't know how to explain this better, but there's a very subtle quality about it.
Yeah, taking it from there. From Office Tiger to Shot in Bombay, one thing that I've noticed was the narrative. There was documentaries of whatever I have seen. The narrative is not as, let's say, crisp as it. There was very little to distinguish between a movie, a storytelling, and a documentary. What is your reference? What do you look up to, or what were your references when you're actually trying to make documentaries, and then trying to show the documentary as a?
I think that I sort of have two. My background, my kind of training in documentary is in classic observational cinema. So Fred Wiseman and the Maisels and all that idea where you never have a voiceover, you let scenes unfold, you cover everything. The trick with that kind of shooting is you have to cover your scenes the way you would cover a feature scene, with reverse shots, reactions, cutaway, all this stuff, but you have to get it all in real time. And it's it's something that it takes years to learn to do, and and you have to have a working really closely with your camera person, this sort of silent communication, so you're covering things right. So that's one part of it, is this sort of, letting the people tell their own stories.